Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to a special edition of the 52 Weeks of Leadership. My name is Kalen.
And my name is Jim, and we've never done anything quite like this before. Turns out we had a little bit of an issue with 52 Weeks of Leadership, where a few weeks ago we did a webinar, one of our normal Monday webinars every Monday, on the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion in leadership. But we found out we couldn't share the recorded version of that with you. So we only, by the end of the year, we'd only have 51 installments of the 52 Weeks of Leadership, which would be a little silly. So we thought, hey, maybe this is a great time to record a bonus episode.
Yes, and of course, diversity, equity, and inclusion is at the forefront of everybody's priority list right now, because inclusion for your employees, whether we're talking racially related or LGBTQ, et cetera, is at number one on everyone's list right now.
So important topic, happy to do it again, and I'm sure we'll be doing it again at least a couple of times over the rest of 2021. Wow, is it really 2021? I feel so futuristic saying stuff like that. Something exciting that I want to share right at the beginning of this, though. We've got a sponsor now. I mean, wow, we've hit the big time. The 52 Weeks of Leadership has a sponsor. They're making sure that we will, in fact, be able to keep doing this throughout the course of 2021. So I want to shout out a big thanks to our brand new sponsor, Geico, for making this possible. I guess before we jump into it, they don't know who we are. Maybe we should introduce ourselves.
Okay, well, hello, how you doing? My name is Kalen Norris, and I am a third-year PhD candidate here at the University at Buffalo. I work with my primary advisor, Dr. Jim Lemoyne. So I would say, what should you know about me? My research is published in the Journal of Leadership and Organizational Studies.
He's very proud of that.
Very proud, because it's my first author publication. I was awarded the UB School of Management Rising Star Award. So those are just two of my credentials, and I just wanted to share with you my research interests. I research everything related to diversity, equity, inclusion, leadership, some within group differences work, research methods, and also I'm extending my range to include creativity.
And my name is Jim Lemoyne. I am an assistant professor and a researcher in the School of Organization and Human Resources, and in the School of Management, here at the University of Buffalo, working primarily with the Center for Leadership and Organizational Effectiveness, which is putting these webinars together. Done one of these before. We'll be doing a couple of them in the future. And I spend actually most of my time doing research as well. My primary area actually doesn't have anything to do with diversity, so I'm only here because of him. I'm a leadership researcher. I study leadership and ethics and the degree to which they intersect, and sometimes they don't. Dabble a little bit in creativity and research methods. We're both kind of math geeks in that way. I've written a few papers on gender diversity because so many implications for that, for leadership, for the emergence, for the effectiveness. But I never really got into any other forms of diversity until Kalen came along as my doctoral student and dragged me into it. And right now we're working on a whole bunch of projects with companies actually right here in West New York, trying to dive really deeply into, what does this really mean? Beyond the surface level stuff, diversity is important, inclusion is important, let's focus on that. Great. How? What should you be focusing on? And for me, starting off on this topic, whenever I start off on a topic, I like to make sure we're all on the same page with what these words really mean. So I think that might be a good place to start. I mean, when we talk about DIE, or DIE, that's DEI. DEI is better.
Yeah.
When we talk about DEI, are we really talking about the same things? Because I mean, from my corporate experience, I had 12 years before I came to academia. I'm not really sure we are. So I thought that'd be a good place to start. And I guess I should also say, we have no script.
No script.
We have not rehearsed this. There is no teleprompter in front of us. You can watch our eyes. They're not going to be going back and forth. So we have no clue how this is going to go, or even necessarily what we're going to talk about. But we'll just sit in my office and talk for like an hour easy about this stuff. So we thought 20-25 minutes for this should be easy for us to do. Should be epic, an epic success or an epic failure. Either way, it's going to be epic. So anyway, back to diversity, equity, and inclusion. One thing I like to ask my classes a lot is, does diversity help in organizations? Does diversity help in teams? Will a diverse team do better? And the answer they always give me is?
It depends. And what we see in the literature, I would say diversity research took root in the management, applied psychology, organizational behavior literature in the early 90s, and what we saw was a focus on diversity management. Cox 1991, and saying that diversity was beneficial for the organizations because having diverse people with different viewpoints and different perspectives would essentially increase the creativity and innovation amongst the work team within the organization.
And you hear what he just said, because the different viewpoints and different perspectives. And that's the key point. That's the key point. And this is something that I try to make really clear with my classes when I talk about diversity. And this may sound not politically correct, but I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here. If you've got a team that is diverse, whether that be gender diversity, racial diversity, religious diversity, however you want to talk about, just because it's diverse, that doesn't necessarily make it better.
Not at all.
Just because there's a black man and a white man up here, just because our skin colors are different, or if we had a woman up here, just because there was a man and a woman, that fact alone is not going to impact your productivity at all.
No, not at all. Because what most people think when they hear diversity, because, well, to be honest with you, before I embarked on this journey of doing DEI research, I thought that diversity and inclusion was one and the same because people use the terms interchangeably. But inclusion is the next step of the diversity and inclusion piece, because inclusion moves us past diversity management and gets us to ensuring that our employees feel like they both belong and are capable of bringing their true selves to the workplace every day.
And I love the way you just put it. It's like the next level. Because I'm not going to say, I've worked with a lot of organizations in my career, both as an employee and as a consultant or as a trainer. And there are a lot of organizations that take it to the first level. And I think today they still are. And I think there's a lot of organizations that still focus on the first level. Can we get a diverse workforce? What are the benefits of a diverse workforce on their own? Well, you're going to prevent lawsuits.
Yep.
That's good. And if that's your goal and that's your only goal, okay, fine. It's a moral good in that you're being fair in a way that some organizations may not be. Maybe even your own organization hasn't been in the past. But just because you've got 50% men, 50% women, just because you have a good number of ethnic or racial minorities, something like that, just because you've got a lot of immigrants, that fact alone gets you zero organizational benefits. In fact, there's some research going back all the way to the 70s, and I'm thinking of the similarity attraction paradigm here, that says diversity, oh, and this is really not politically correct, so maybe we have to edit this out later, but diversity could actually hurt if mismanaged. You know what I'm getting at with that?
Yeah, so essentially the study that he's talking about, I'm going to imagine the Robbers Cave experience, the Robbers Cave experiment, where the researchers essentially found that in it's the minimal group paradigm that says that even groups distinctively split, separated or compete against each other, increased the bias that was felt between and amongst the groups.
Yeah, it's in the similarity attraction paradigm, it basically says, and this is true, by the way, and this is depressing. For some people it's conscious, for some people it's subconscious, but it is reality that we have to face up to. We are more comfortable with other people the more they look like us. I, by the similarity attraction paradigm, I'm going to be most comfortable with, I'm going to be most likely to be friends with, I'm going to be most likely to hang out with, go drinking with, whatever it is I do, to work closely with, and maybe even to promote, to select for my team people who look more like me, a younger white guy.
Right.
And this applies to gender. This applies to race, it applies to ethnicity, it applies to religion, and it applies to all forms. It applies to men, it applies to women, it applies to white people, it applies to black people, it applies to Hispanics. We are more comfortable with people who look like us. And I mean, the great example I have of this, which was something that I think made people feel awkward, when I was in 6th grade, I'll never forget this, I don't think I've ever told you this story. When I was in 6th grade, I noticed that all of the black girls always sat together for lunch. And they were having a great time. And one day, being a stupid 6th grader, I just innocently asked my teacher, why do the black girls always sit together? Because honestly, the reason I asked was because they look like they were having more fun than any of us, and I wanted in on it. But it's the similarity attraction paradigm at work. We feel more comfortable. And this, I think, tell me what you think. He knows the research better than I do. I think this explains why so many diversity initiatives in the past have failed.
I would agree. And just to piggyback off something that you just said, because the importance of the Robbers Cave experiments was that the groups that displayed bias against each other were intermixed groups. So basically, the main takeaway from it was just being in a group led to the bias, irrespective of race, gender, et cetera, et cetera. So with that being said, a lot of the diversity initiatives that we see with in organizations, they fail because they automatically assume that because you're in the mixing people together that you're going to get the benefits of diversity. But what Jim is speaking on is essentially, and you may have heard this saying before: birds of a feather flock together. Is essentially what he's saying. So in order for organizations to maximize the benefits of having a diverse workforce and to again get us to that next level, it is time that we discuss and we really focus on and start focusing in on the inclusion of all employees, which again is an employee's feelings that they are both they belong to the work group, but they also are able to maintain their uniqueness.
Yeah, and I know that's specifically what Kaylin and I are doing some research on. And Kaylin and I, that order was in a specific order because he is leading this research. But this is the important between diversity and inclusion. And frankly, as a researcher, as a human being, I'm really excited that now we're not just talking about diversity. I mean, I don't know about you, but it seems my whole life we've heard about diversity. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm saying it's not enough. Like you said, it's the first level. Mm-hmm. And too often, I think the emphasis on diversity has led us to stop there and say, okay, well, I've hired some minorities, I've hired some women, I've hired some people of different religions. I'm good. I'm done. But then based on that research you were talking about and the research I'm talking about, if you just do that, there's a very good likelihood you'll get what actually Dr. Kate Bezerkova, a professor here, studies a lot, which is called fault lines, which is basically where, well, all of the black women, they're going to work together, they're going to hang out together, they're going to be in their own little cluster, and then here's all the young white guys, and they're over here in their little cluster, and they're really not crossing these lines, these dividing lines. And then, why does diversity benefit? Because of the different perspectives that get shared. Well, the different perspectives aren't getting shared, so you're really wasting your time. I mean, it's good that you've got a diverse group, but you're not getting the benefits of that.
Yes, and let me take it a step further and explain why you may not be getting these benefits. Is because, again, once birds of a feather flock together. So what does that mean? That means that you're in a network, a closed network, and it's redundant information that's essentially traveling around this network. So again, they would say, or most studies say, that diversity benefits creativity, but how can it if your employees are operating in silos and echo chambers and only sharing redundant information with each other?
And unfortunately, that is our natural human inclination. Research shows that's the natural human inclination for, I'm going to keep going with race, since that's what we've been talking about, for white people, for black people, for Hispanic people, for Asians. It's our natural inclination to trust the people who look like us a little bit more. It's not conscious in a lot of cases, it's subconscious. And unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do to control it. If we acknowledge it, we can do a little bit about that. And there are ways to try to overcome it. But what you need to know as a manager is, if you've just got a diverse team, and you haven't done anything to make sure that everybody feels included, that they feel that they are willing, that they feel safe to share these different perspectives and ideas, to say things that maybe might catch other people by surprise, or that they never would have considered, or maybe even that make people feel a little uncomfortable. If you haven't built the culture that allows that, then you are getting zero of the benefits of diversity and inclusion, and in fact, you might be hurting your team in the long run.
I would agree. I think that it is very important as in 2021 and moving forward that to ensure that we are moving towards these inclusive environments for all employees, that we are, as Jim said, we are starting to ask these tough questions and to ask people their different perspectives on things. And as a manager, if I'm a manager in an organization, I'm going up to my diverse employees because it is incumbent upon you to start creating that environment and leading by example to ask individuals how their day is going and just get to know them on a more personable level, to start exploring how their uniqueness makes them different. And then as a manager, you will be able to say, oh, okay, well, if I can provide this employee with this resource, this might be able to help develop their skill set because I see how it all ties in, and then we can start maximizing the benefits of diversity from that aspect.
And I know that that in our research that we've done, you actually introduced me to some research that was done in 2013 by Shore about belongingness and uniqueness. And really what we've been focusing on in our research is that there can be a tension for those in any minority group. We focused on racial minorities, but this could apply to gender minority. It could certainly apply to religious minority or any other kind of minority you might want to think of. You're the expert on this. I mean, he's studied this so much. He's probably like a world-class expert at this point. Tell us a little bit about belongingness and uniqueness and kind of the tension between them.
Okay, so the tension between, as he alluded to, I introduced him to some research, Show It All, 2011. They basically said that it's time to revisit the definition of inclusion, because what we had been observing in the literature is more so a focus on minorities assimilating to adopt the norms of the majority group. In this case, it would be Caucasian white males, and usually. So basically, what they proposed was to really be considered inclusion, it has to focus on, or it would be satisfying someone's needs of both uniqueness and belongingness. And by uniqueness, well, let's start with belongingness. So by belongingness, it essentially, the underlying theory is how do you belong to your work group? We all, as human beings, we have a fundamental need to belong to our groups. So as an employee of the work group, I feel like I belong when I'm involved in the decision making amongst the group. I feel like I belong when it's equity, and I feel like it's fair promotion processes, and it's a fair just evaluations and so on and so forth within the organization. But then also
let's pause there and go a little bit more into that. And I've noticed you keep edging this way. You're like getting in my personal space.
Okay,
here.
let me start.
We're supposed to be balanced.
We're like magnets.
You're in the center here.
Yeah.
We were supposed to be splitting this. Belongingness, like Kaylin said, it's a basic human need that we all have. Now, for some of us who feel like we belong to the groups we're in, we kind of take it for granted. And that's more likely to happen, for instance, the higher up you are in an organization. Well, of course I belong here. Of course my opinion matters. Of course people value my contributions. One good check for top managers, especially, to ask themselves a lot, does everybody who work here really feel like they belong, like they're included? One of the best treatments of this that I ever saw, it's actually not in a research paper, but by one of your favorite authors, C.S. Lewis, who we talk about a lot.
All the time.
If you were to Google C.S. Lewis, an essay, it's not an essay actually, it was a speech he gave called The Ring, The Inner Ring, and I actually have to credit my friends at Hodgson Russ for introducing me to this piece. It's all about how we all want to be part of that inner ring, and if we're not in it, it's a strong drive for us to find a way to get into it, to find that place where we belong. And I believe, just to paraphrase what you were saying earlier, make sure that I understand it, you're saying basically that in the past, when we've talked about diversity, we focused on, okay, minorities want to belong, let's help them belong, they need to assimilate. They need to be like the majority, whatever the majority is.
Yes, and that's what we've typically seen, but now, in these past, I would say in the last 10 years or so, we've seen a strong push to start really focusing on identifying what both uniqueness and belongingness is for minorities, and so let's explore the uniqueness piece. And that piece is essentially sticking with race because, hey, white, black, it just makes sense. So let's just stick with that. So my uniqueness, I'm able to maintain my uniqueness if I feel as though I can come to work and pull in the parking lot listening to rap music with my windows down. And that's me.
Can we pause there?
Okay.
Can we pause there? Think about where you work. Think about where you work. And maybe this is an easy answer for you, or maybe it's a difficult one, but I think this is a good thought experiment. Do you think every black employee where you work would be comfortable with that? That they could pull up, obviously not so loud that they're disrupting everything.
Right.
Nothing like that, but at an appropriate level. But let's say a black employee pulled up with their coworkers, with their boss, and they're blasting rap music?
Yep.
Yeah. Do you honestly believe every African-American employee in your organization would be okay with that, would be comfortable with that? Or what might they do?
Or would I have NPR on programming to my radio so when I pull into the parking lot, I just automatically cut on NPR?
Just switch it really quick because you're managing that impression. Because you don't feel like you can always be yourself.
I don't feel as though I can be my unique self. So moving forward, it's important that as a manager that you take a step back and take an honest and objective assessment of your beliefs with respect to diversity in the workplace, and you should ask yourself, do I go up? Do I interact with my dissimilar subordinates that may have whether it's a visible or invisible difference? And do I make them feel like they belong? Yeah. Do I show interest? Do I show a genuine interest? Because we know, and the research would say that as managers, you only have a certain amount of cognitive resources. You only have a certain amount of time to invest in developing your relationships with your employees. And what the research would say is that managers typically have high quality relationships with a select few employees, and it varies with your other employees. So you have to ask yourself, hey, are these strong relationships that I do have, are they with individuals who look similar to me?
And the research says often they are. Often they are. And that doesn't necessarily say, oh my goodness, you're a flaming racist. That's the similarity attraction paradigm at work again. Dr. Prasad Balkundi, another one of the professors here, who does a lot of research on social networks, he finds again and again that our close social networks, our close friends, they tend to be people who look like us, about the same age, same gender, things like that. So it's just a natural, subconscious, in most cases, human phenomenon that we have to combat if we want to get the most out of diversity, making it an inclusive environment.
And just to piggyback off what Jim said, if you really want to test this theory that he's talking about right now, you should get a sheet of paper and you write down 1, 2, 3, and write down within your organization, write down your 3 subordinates that you are most close with, or even
could be your peers,
or even your peers.
Mean, everything we're saying could be your peers. It could even be the people ranked above you. But the people you're closest with, Prasad's not going to like this because he's going to do one of these 52 weeks, and you just spoiled his best exercise.
Right. Well, hey, listen, Prasad, you got to bring something else.
If you are watching Prasad's webinar later in the year, then just pretend you didn't hear. Don't mention this. He won't. He's the department chair. He doesn't need to hear about any of this. But the bigger point I think that Caitlin's trying to make is just that overall. You started out by saying the benefits of diversity for organizations beyond the lawsuits and beyond doing the right thing, which is important. The benefit is that people get to share their unique perspectives. We've always focused on belonging. Let's make people feel like they belong. And that's an important thing. We need to do that in our organizations. We want to do that. We want to have that as people. But there's nothing in belongingness. If you have to assimilate, if you have to change who you are to fit in, if you have to act a different way than you normally would act, then there's no way in the world you're going to share all the ideas you might have, all the new steps you might suggest, and you're not getting any of these benefits out of diversity that you could be. It's the tension that has developed between belongingness and uniqueness. We have gotten to a point, you're coming back towards me again. We've gotten to a point over the last few decades, in some ways well-intentioned, in some ways not well-intentioned at all, where I think we've asked a lot of minorities, whether they be racial, gender, religious, whatever, we've told them basically, you need to sacrifice your uniqueness to get belonging. You have to assimilate. You have to do more to fit in. And I'm not saying you don't try to fit in to some degree, but there's a middle ground here where, I'm fitting in with the team, but I'm not having to sacrifice part of who I am to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and essentially what I hear when Jim says, just basically just listening to Jim talk, I'm thinking about psychological safety. So if we only focus on the diversity piece and with that focus on just the belongingness aspect, and if I belong to the team, then I'm going to feel psychologically safe, but it's going to be constrained with respect to assimilating to the norms of the majority group within the work group. But if I feel as though not only did I belong to the work group, so me and Jim are, buddy friends in the workplace, but then also I can maintain my individual uniqueness, then at this point, then that's when we get into, we start seeing I think this is a beautiful area that we need to get to, because now I feel psychologically safe enough to express my divergent viewpoints. And this is why I think, and this is my perspective on this matter, Jim, and this is why, hold on, let me say that right. Let me say that correctly. What I'm saying is, because now, not only do I belong to the work group, but I also can maintain my uniqueness, now my psychological safety has no constraints. And I'm open and willing to share my perspective, because I know it's going to be valued and it's going to be taken with full consideration, and et cetera, et cetera.
And let's take a step back. and by the way, I'm pretty sure that we just violated social distancing protocols with that sort of thing. Yeah, so just forget you saw that. what is psychological safety? That's a term that's starting to show up like in your Harvard Business Reviews and your TED Talks, but let's make sure we're all on the same page. Again, let's make sure we all understand what this is. Psychological safety, and think about your workplace. Think about your work team, or think about past teams you've been on. I can think of places I've worked that were high on this and some that were low. Is this a place where everybody feels like I could throw out a crazy idea and I wouldn't get attacked for it? Or I could try something new and bold and it could go wrong despite my best efforts, and I wouldn't be punished for it. Or I could shout out something that completely disrupts the status quo, and that wouldn't offend anybody. That's the kind of climate we're talking about with psychological safety. It's open-mindedness, really, in a big way. We are open to all ideas, even ideas that contradict our traditions, contradict the way things have been in the past, and that can be a really good thing, right? Because if you always do what you've always done, you're always going to get what you've always gotten. In my first book that I wrote that a tradition is basically something that you do for no better reason than the fact that it's always been done. And if you've got another good reason for your traditions, that's fine, but hopefully the point gets across. Psychological safety, this idea that we've got a workplace culture where anybody can speak up with an idea without retaliation, without backlash, without punishment. You can try new things, and as long as you give it a good faith effort, even if it fails, you're not going to be punished for it because we all agreed it was a good idea in the first place. This kind of climate is fantastic for performance in general, but creativity in specific. And there is some research that's pointing to it as a really key area for increasing inclusion, for increasing this diversity stuff. So with that in mind, so we've talked a lot about belongingness and uniqueness. How do we get people to that magical place, based on your review of the research, where they can have both? What can leaders do so that all of their employees, whether they be man or woman, white or black, whatever, they all feel like they both belong to the organization, but I get to still maintain what's unique about me here?
So I would say,
that's a tough question.
because, well, to be honest with you, I'm sitting there thinking about it, and I know what the literature says, but why not just use a real world example? Because when you as a black man in the PhD program, I'm the only black man in my department. And again, like I said, Jim is my advisor, and we've been working together for almost 4 years now. Well, really, 5. Yeah, it's been, 5. I emailed Jim August 24th, 2016. I went back because I just told my story recently about how I got into the PhD program. So I emailed you August 24th, 2016. So I would say we've been working together since then. Wow. And I would say that our relationship has progressed to where I feel psychologically safe, and I felt this way when this past summer, I went to the gym with something very, I would say it was a shock for me. So I experienced something, and I went to the gym, and ultimately I ended up crying in his office. And at that moment, I would say our relationship.
That's on camera now. You okay with
yeah, it's okay because it's psychologically safe.
Yeah.
Because
real men can cry. That's okay.
So essentially, but what I'm saying is, at that moment, you realize, like, hey, if I can sit in front of a white guy, a white man, and sit here and cry, then it's nothing that I shouldn't be able to share with him because he's seen me cry. So with that being said, so now, even if I have a terrible idea, terrible, I still would take it to him just because I know that any type of pushback or criticism that I got on the idea, that you gave me on the idea, it would be constructive. But as opposed to, now let's say we didn't have this type of relationship, and
I hope we had that kind of relationship before this.
Yeah, of course. But it's just, you just start noticing those little subtle things, and it's like, well, if we didn't have that relationship, my bad ideas, I don't think that I would take them to him because I wouldn't feel as comfortable and as safe. So essentially, the main takeaway, I said that story as a segue to say, as managers, as leaders, it is incumbent upon you to live your creed. And by that is going and talking to your employees, getting to know them, letting them know on a genuine level that I'm here for you. Yeah. I want to learn about you.
Yeah, and the word that you kept saying in that story, which about to make me cry, relationships. I do hope you felt that way before the summer, but relationships was the word that Kaylin kept saying. And there's multiple thoughts on this. There's some people who say that a work relationship should just be a work relationship. It's none of your business if they're married, what's going on with their kids, what's going on in their personal lives. And there's something to be said for that viewpoint. However, there's more research and thought around kind of the opposite, that it is a good thing, it is a helpful thing. My own research shows, now we're getting into the leadership side, personal relationships actually do matter, that if your employees realize that you have some personal concern for them beyond the workplace, like I care, even if you weren't my employee, I would care about you. That's kind of the message that you're trying to send. I care about you as a human being, not just as an employee. I want to know, how are things going in your personal life? What kind of experiences have you had in the past that have been hurtful to you or helpful to you? What do I need to know about you that I can learn from? What skills do you have that we haven't brought to the table yet? To work for the benefit of the team and organization, developing a closer relationship beyond the basic work relationship can have huge benefits, both in general for leaders and followers, but also in this diversity sphere, getting to know people. One of my favorite theories in all of, and I don't know if we've ever talked about this, so I'd love your opinion on this. One of my favorite theories in all of the field of organizational psychology and social psychology is what's called the contact hypothesis. Which basically says that one of the best ways to get rid of stereotypes, to get rid of discrimination, to get rid of racism, no matter what demographic barriers we're talking about, it's just to interact with people who are different from you. In other words, explaining it to Grandma, put it in simple words, the more a white person interacts with a black person, the less racially biased that person's going to be, because it's hard to make broad and unfair generalizations about people who you work with a lot on a daily basis, who you're friends with, things like that. Do you have any thoughts on the contact hypothesis? Have you come across that?
I do, and I can tie it back into one of our previous conversations that we had. Maybe 2 weeks ago, so right now we're currently working with some school of management honor students on some research, some undergrad on some research, and Matt, he was in the office maybe 2 weeks ago, and we was talking about a research project, and I said something like, I was saying this to Matt, like, hey, and this is why I like hanging out with people that are smarter than me. And you said, no. You said, I'm not smarter than you, I just have a different perspective. And that is the main takeaway with what you just said, because it's just like, as people, regardless of what our differences are, you should be able to come meet an individual on their level. Like, using me and Jim as an example, I'm coming to meet Jim on the level, as a man, this is who I am, and we build from that. So with that being said, it's just like, you have to be able to respect other people's perspectives, and also remember that it's okay for people to be different, and we have our disagreement. It's okay for us to disagree, just as long as you remember the rules of reasoned debate, and that it is a mutual respect amongst each other for having, with respect to our different opinions. That was a long-winded answer, but
no, I like that. No, that's good, and I think that's a good place to end. Is that those two words you just said, mutual respect. We could we look different. We could act different. We could listen to different kinds of music. We could have different hobbies. And I'm talking about you, your peers, your supervisors, the people you work with, the people who work for you. There's going to be a lot of differences there. Anybody who's ever seen me speak knows that I'm big on servant leadership, that this is something I research a lot. And one thing that Bob Greenleaf said was the foundation of effective leadership is, do you respect everyone as a human being? That does not mean that you always agree with them. That doesn't mean you always like what they do. It doesn't mean you always like what they say. But it means despite all that, it doesn't even mean you say that their performance is fine. It means I respect you as a human being. I care for you as a human being, and I will listen to you as a human being and be humble and realize that I'm not always right, and my experiences might not necessarily be true for everyone, and we respect it. I mean, that's a foundation to an effective, and if you've got that mutual respect, that's the foundation on which you can build the kind of personal relationships you were just talking about, and have more effective leader-follower relationships in general. But in diversity, that's how you can get to the point where you get both belongingness and inclusiveness. And I think we can end with this. It's only by getting both belongingness and inclusiveness that you get any of the benefits of diversity.
Yep, that takes us past discrimination, racism, and inclusion.
So I think we've gone on like as long as a webinar normally would have gone. And normally at this point we would ask for questions from the audience, from people in chat. So let's see what you had to say. Look, here's some questions right here. Oh, look, this one's for you, Kaylin.
Oh, okay.
Why don't you read it? Why don't you read it for anybody who can't open the chat window?
Okay, Kaylin, what's the number one thing the research says I should be doing right now to help all of my employees feel included? So the number one thing that the research says that you should be doing.
That's a good question.
Well, one, you should have pro-diversity beliefs. You should start objectively assessing your pro-diversity beliefs. Meaning, how do you feel about diversity within the workplace? And you got to be honest with yourself.
And not just diversity, but inclusion too, right?
So inclusion as well. So with the diversity is just how do you think that diversity benefits the organization? And what we're seeing is a positive relationship between pro-diversity beliefs and inclusive leadership. And again, the positive benefits of inclusion, which would be the creativity, the positive work identification, but also, so one, you should assess your pro-diversity beliefs. Two, you should ask yourself, are you humble? Do you have the humility to realize that it's bigger than you? And by it being and saying that it's bigger than you is realizing that I can go and talk to my employees and meet them on their level because I want to just genuinely get to know them because I've been entrusted with this leadership position to do just that. And then also I would say the third thing, but that's my two. What about you?
I'm going to go back to personal relationships. Like take some time to sit down with an employee, especially an employee who's different from you, but do it with all your employees, right? And if they're comfortable with it, if you've got that foundation of mutual respect, just ask them, hey, what's going on in your life right now? What's worrying you right now? And that's been especially important in 2020, right, with everything that's been going on. What's going on right now? And then if you want to take it to the next work level, here's one of my favorite questions that leaders can ask, that servant leaders, this actually comes from the servant leadership philosophy, but I think it's really great for building the mutual respect and relationships. What can I do today to help you achieve your goals? And note that I didn't say, what can you do to help me? And I didn't even say, what can I do to help you achieve your work goals? I said, in general, your goals. And asking questions like that, showing employees that you put them first, regardless of your differences, I think could go a long way. You buy that?
I would.
Let's see what other questions we've got. Jim, can you tell us more about putting the contact hypothesis into practice? Yeah, that's tricky, because the best way for it to work is if it works naturally. Like if you just, if you happen to go to school or you happen to join a team, part of it is just make sure your teams are diverse. Make sure that's the point. I had a friend I worked with at a large company. I'm not going to say his name. I'm not going to say what company it was. But he would actually go out of his way to put together teams that were diverse in every way possible, to do every little thing. And this was really neat to me, and I had to think about this for a while. He would take people he was really concerned had some stereotypes, whether it be chauvinism or misogyny or racial stereotypes or whatever, and he would purposely put them with people opposite of them. The people who they judged poorly, who they didn't like, and he would make sure that they were with competent people of the opposite gender, of a different race, something like that, and force them to work together. And I don't know if that's research backed at all or not, but he told me, and I got to see a little bit of this, there actually were benefits from this. It is impossible to keep a strong stereotype in your head against a group of people if you interact with that group of people in a positive way on a regular basis. Now, some researchers say that the contact hypothesis only works, and there's research back and forth on this. It's mixed, so I don't know what to tell you on this, but I kind of agree with this, that it only works if there's no status differences. And what that means is it's not going to do a whole lot of good for a racist white person if you put them in charge of a group of black people, or a racist misogynist if he's in charge of a group of women. There is a theory that says that this contact hypothesis stuff only works if the playing field is leveled. Everybody's at the same status. And again, the research is kind of mixed on this, but I like that idea. I mean, it appeals to me. It makes sense to me logically. If you are in a position of hierarchy where you are allowed to think that you are better than someone else, and I know leaders should never think that, but let's be honest, a lot of managers do. I'm not sure the contact hypothesis can work as cleanly as it otherwise would. Kaylin, this one's for you.
Okay. Kaylin, you look like you're in great shape. What's your secret? The gym. I go to the gym and say it differently, discipline. Once you make the decision, all you got to do is decide. And then from that point, you just, soak in the necessary information that can help you achieve your goals and stay disciplined.
And the interesting thing about your answer to that, it's almost as if whoever typed that question in knew that you were going to say that, because discipline's really the key to a lot of what we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
You've got to have the discipline to change the existing way of doing things, to change your existing mindset. the discipline to challenge the way things maybe have always gone in your organization with the relationships. Okay, last one. Jim, where can we learn more? Well, I am glad you asked, because I'm happy to announce that Chloe just launched the website for our big June conference. Every year we have a big conference on the future of leadership. That's the theme for this year. We were going to do it last year, but the future got postponed due to COVID. Very excited to announce that we've got Daniel Pink, the author of bestsellers like Drive, New York Times bestseller, one of the best business thinkers in the world. He's going to be doing the keynote. We've got over, I think, 40 workshops now. It's insane, with tracks including things like entrepreneurship and healthcare management. And oh, hey, inclusive leadership is going to be in there. I'll be presenting, Kaylin will be presenting as well. And of course, there's all kinds of information coming your way every Monday on the 52 Weeks of Leadership. We thank you very much for joining. Thank you for doing this for me, Kaylin.
Yeah.
We've never done anything like this before.
Nope, first time. And listen, I just want you to know this was not scripted, and we only started over one time. And yes.
I think we'll let them be we'll see how many likes we get.
Okay.
So thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you every Monday from 12 o'clock to 12:30 right here for the University of Buffalo Center for Leadership and Organizational Effectiveness, 52 Weeks of Leadership. Have a great day.